All right, let's get started. Good day to everybody. Thank you so much. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is Legacy into Leading, How to Transform into a Cutting Edge Manufacturer. And we have the pleasure today of being joined by Dan Murray. He is the CEO and founder of Vertex Software. Paul Nelson, CTO and Tech Fellow with Northrop Grumman, and our host, Joseph Anderson, the president of IpX. And with that, Joseph, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Deanna. Dan, Paul, thanks for joining us today. All the attendees, thanks for taking the time. Before we get started with the topic, I would like to give, Dan and Paul a chance to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about who they are, what they do at their current organization, how they got there, and maybe a little fun fact. So again, Dan, Paul, thanks for taking the time. And let's go ahead and get started. Dan, we'll make this easy. We'll let you go first, and then we'll do Paul.
Oh, thanks, Joe. I don't know if it's easy, but let's see what I can do. Yeah, I've had kind of an interesting journey to get to Vertex. I studied mechanical engineering in college, so manufacturing is a first love of mine. I studied in school. My first job out of school was I built a company called Engineering Animation Incorporated back in the 90s. That came out of working in a visualization lab that was the first of its kind at Iowa State. And my first project there was for NASA. It was kind of crazy. I was working on 3D animations of the International Space Station, the Space Shuttle, and the X-30, the National Aerospace Plane. So I got to do the animation and the physics for takeoffs and landings. It was really cool, and that gave me a real passion for industrial visualization, which is what Vertex is all about today. After we grew EAI and ultimately took it public and sold it, I ran a group. I was chief software engineer there and ran a group of about 280 developers. And if I have a feather from that, it's that I am the creator of BizMockup and the JT file format, which are pretty common things today. That experience and just pioneering industrial 3D visualization was really fun. It was also really hard back then. Trying to figure a lot of things out. I built a number of companies since then. I've kind of become a serial entrepreneur and focused on software. So I built 6 companies in total, and the one right before Vertex is called Workiva, which is used cloud-based financial reporting. So it's used by over 70% of public companies in the US and used worldwide for financial reporting, FP&A. It's all cloud-based and collaborative, and I got to a point with that company where I could really see and had an interest in getting back to my roots in manufacturing. And so I started talking to some friends in the industry who talked about challenges really in trying to leverage CAD data for applications downstream of engineering, getting it to sales and service and factory, and really creating rich interactive 3D experiences. And I looked at the state of industry at that point and said, well, 3D should really be easy. And so that led me to really putting a team together of people that cloud computing experts, 3D visualization, industrial visualization experts, and information security pioneers that really have a passion for making 3D easy. And our mantra is we enable anyone with an idea to create powerful 3D applications in no time. And so at this point, we're the only platform really that enables non-3D developers, if you know HTML and JavaScript, to build 3D industrial applications that truly scale. We've solved a massive model problem, and they're easy to deploy and maintain, and reach everyone everywhere, any device, without having to deliver data to the device, that big 3D data to the device. Fun facts about me. Well, I was thinking about that a little bit this morning because Joe, you told me you were going to ask that question. 2 things. I'm coming up on my 30-year anniversary. My wife, we've been married 30 years. We've known each other since 7th and 8th grade, so we're best friends. And so the pandemic, while it's been tough, I don't think we'd have it any other way, being able to spend time with each other. And I'm also big into tech, just tech anything. And I'm a gamer, mostly because it connects me with my son. So I play games. I just finished a Doom game and just started another one. And basically I follow my son in my son's wake. He's much better than me. And I just kind of pick up on what he's playing, and it gives us something to talk about.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dan. Paul.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. I see a lot of friends on the line, just, Martin Romer and Jared Young and Mike Treadwell and on. I probably missed them in there too, just glancing really quick, but it's good to see a bunch of you on too. So I have had the craziest, funnest journey in my career. And I think I thought I was going to go into music growing up. Played the saxophone. I went and lived in Russia for a couple years and speak fluent Russian. And then I thought I wanted to go into international business. And my dad, who's a geophysicist, said, hey, go get a technical degree. And he has an MBA too. And he's like, you can always move into the business side. And so I went into mechanical engineering because it was kind of a jack of all trades kind of thing. But even a connection to you there, Dan, because growing up, my dad was the first one to use VR for 3D seismic data interpretation for finding oil and gas. And we came to Iowa State. We're in the first caves there. I remember as a kid being there in caves at Ames, Iowa, and at the University of Houston, going to their caves and using that for oil and gas exploration. He sold his company to Halliburton and did quite well in that. And anyway, so I ended up landing on engineering. And while I was doing my engineering studies, I had, I think, a key inflection point for my career and my mindset around digital and around transforming how we build products. I was in a fluid dynamics course, and I had programmed all my Navier-Stokes equations, my partial differential equations, into my calculator. And I had a professor that was kind of like, hey, no one ever finishes my exams. They're too hard. The highest grade I've ever given is a B. And he almost bragged about it. And I thought, I'm going to ace this course. It like lit a fire under me. I'm just a rebel without a cause, I think, sometimes. And so I programmed all these into my calculator. And he said I could use my calculator. And I finished his exam in like record time. And I aced it. And he thought I cheated on the test. He's like, there's no way you could have finished it in an hour. It's a 3-hour test. And you had to somehow have cheated. I said, no, look, here's what I did. I coded it all in my calculator, and I know this stuff inside and out because I programmed it. And he was like, well, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. So you got to retake a different test, which I finished in 2 hours and still aced. But it really created in me this engineering is done. Our engineering, manufacturing, sustainment, product development is done with digital amplifiers. And if we have good process and we have good people, that can be an amplifier for good. Now, if you have crappy process and crappy people, I think it can be an amplifier for bad. So I think it amplifies bidirectionally. But it really got me excited about, early in my career, just this opportunity to change the way we do product development. And I've been riding that for 20 years now. So, and like Dan, we've been married 20 years, and I've got 5 kiddos, and great journey there. My family's just super supportive, and like Dan, also just a tech nut. We program our Christmas lights with control boxes and FM transmitters, and do Lego robotics, and we just did a whole VR setup, built our own gaming PC, and the kids have been doing virtual reality and lockdown and loving that, and so just having a good time. And but I moved around. So I started with a software company doing technical services for Boeing on F-18 and Space Station. Then I went to work for ATK, which my grandma loved because I could say I was a rocket scientist, even if I wasn't the one doing the propulsive calculations on the solid rocket fuel. And then just through the serendipitous opportunities of mergers and acquisitions, there's been this interesting ladder for me that's just unfolded. I wasn't planned, obviously, and I just attribute it to luck, honestly. But ATK and Orbital merged to form Orbital ATK in 2015, and then in 2018, Northrop Grumman acquired Orbital ATK in June, and then in August, I moved into headquarters of Northrop Grumman to lead what we call next-gen digital engineering. I lead our technical strategy for the company around how we do digital engineering, which is not only design. The DoD has published a digital engineering strategy. You can go out and Google and read about it. It's a great read. But it's also about manufacturing engineering and sustainment engineering, and how do we support that full life cycle with positive digital amplifiers. And so that's what I'm engaged with now, and we're moving to the cloud, and we're on that bleeding edge, and I learn every day, and I'm like, I just can't learn fast enough. There's so many opportunities to learn new things, and I love it, right? I just love it. So I'm infused by it, and I did my CM2 certification, so I've known Joe for a long time, and I'm a big VR virtualization person, and so it's been a pleasure to get to know Dan more too. And so it's great to be here. Great to be here with you, Joe.
Thanks, guys. You know, a little bit of background about me for those that don't know me online. Most of you do. I have known Paul for quite a while, and he's got a competitive passion. You know, and I think the more I'm around Dan, he probably has that as well. It's just this intrigue to make things better. You know, and I think a lot of companies are like that as well. And Paul, I like how you say you use the word amplify, right? It's like good processes or bad processes, good mindsets or bad mindsets. You're going to amplify that one way or the other. And that's kind of why we're here, and that's why a lot of companies are struggling, to be quite honest. You know, the coronavirus has put us all in a very daunting environment. You know, it's a challenge for any company, big, small, medium size. The supply chain just shifting every day. And we have these terms, you know, Industry 4.0, digital transformation, and they're not bad. I personally have always been a bit of an outlier. I think in the industrial revolutions, it's actually gone. And I understand why we use the term Industry 4.0 to really kind of get everyone to hone in. But for me, it's more of it's an evolution. And, you know, when you hear Dan, your background, and Paul, yours, and for anyone that's a hockey fan, I do ask you sometime to ask Paul about his hockey story from his youth. It's quite amazing. But then even in my career, you know, I've spent over 25 years in heavy industry, you know, automotive, and then nuclear marine and aerospace. And I've kind of done it all. And similar to Dan and Paul, I've always kind of pushed the button, and I've never really accepted things are good enough, right? And I think that mentality has caught a lot of companies off guard, and still does. And so when we talk about the inefficiencies of legacy processes, legacy systems, and when you amplify that, you know, what I'd really like you two to touch on first, you know, with these Industry 4.0 terms, the digital transformation terms, you know, and really one that I think intrigues all of us is this model-based future. And I think that scares a lot of people. I don't know that they understand it's far more than just IT. I think this is where you really got to invest in understanding who you are and the supply chain. Can you two kind of expand upon that from your roles? You know, maybe some past mistakes, but also where you're headed, where you see things from your seat today. What is the model-based future? You know, how does a company make it fit for purpose for not just themselves, but for their supply chain? So I'm gonna go on mute for a minute, and we'll just keep going from Dan to Paul, and we'll just have an open dialogue. But for me, what is this model-based future? You know, and what's it going to take for us to really achieve that kind of utopian, brave new world environment where we actually have true efficiency and true effectiveness? Dan?
I'm happy to start, Paul. You're living that every single day. I know I've talked with hundreds of companies like yours, and I guess you know, from my point of view, when you're talking about anything model-based, right, you're talking about a lot of data. Okay, that's the biggest challenge in my mind is, you know, you want certainly everybody to fit certain standards, and a lot of companies I built before, the foundation is in, you know, regulation, regulatory reporting. And so, you know, ultimately, in order to do business, people are going to have to follow certain standards. But you still, even if you do that, you still have this massive amount of data that defines the physical products that you're building. And so, you know, you can look at the details, but the big problem is, how do you enable everyone to participate in the conversation? And, you know, the problem really comes into, how do you avoid moving all that data and keeping everything in sync? And Paul, you've said a few times in, you know, in our conversations that, you know, you're getting pulled into the cloud really fast. And to me, that's the future. Yeah, the future is, you know, cloud native applications, not a lift and shift of current tech, existing status quo tech, which depend on a lot of files. It's granular cloud-based architectures that can operate high-speed parallel and deliver just what's needed to the end user for their purpose, that creates a context for collaboration and communication. So that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, good comments, Dan. The whole model movement, I've heard the head of Navy systems engineering say, all of these exquisite models, at the end of the day, if they don't help us move faster, then what was the point, right? And I think they do help with that, because to Dan's comments, they help with communication and understanding. And I think that's easiest represented with some of the technology that Dan develops around visualization, right? Because I'll never forget, we were doing a virtual reality design review with the Air Force on a new rocket design. And we had Air Force colonels in there walking around in 3D space, looking at these designs of not only the product, but the tooling and the test stands and the transportation and all sorts of aspects of this product development. And we finished the design review, and these are all coded project names like, I don't know, Baby Yoda or whatever, right? And so nobody really knows what you're working on. And we finished the design review, and we said there was an administrative assistant there that helped facilitate a bunch of tours that day for the Air Force. And we just said, hey, do you want to jump in here and check this out? And this administrative assistant, super sharp gal, jumped in, and I'll never forget when she got out, she goes, I had no idea that's what we made. I heard that name, Baby Yoda, 1,000 times, and I didn't know that's what we were doing. And it just came alive instantly for someone that wasn't in the throes of product development. And I think of like how easy it is. I just got a new barbecue grill this summer, and it came with a little QR code on the side that said scan here, and there's these animated visual work instructions on how to assemble the barbecue grill. And compare that to like the old school IKEA, and I know IKEA is doing the same thing too, but doing an old school 2D drawing from IKEA, you just want to shoot yourself in the face. You can't tell what's up and what's down. And so models where they can help communicate intent, communicate interface risk, and mitigate risk to speed become very powerful. Now, there's also a danger there, right? Models are our best estimation of reality, and we have to validate those models and build trust in those models over time. They can really come back to bite you if you put all your trust in a model that maybe isn't validated to reality. And so they're also dangerous in that regard. So we have to find that appropriate balance of trust in our models to help guide our product development. But it's all about speed. I mean, make no mistake, time is money. If we move faster, we got to deliver products faster. We all feel that pressure, right? I don't care what industry you're in. It's about being to market faster, responding to a threat faster. And I think speed's the name of the game. And if models help us move faster, we should do them. And if they don't, we maybe should think about, are they really adding the value we think they're adding? So I think it's a balancing act in there.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that balancing act a little bit, because I think there's just some amazing solutions out there, amazing platforms, some really interesting niche software applications, and all these things could and should speed you up. But I think one thing I'm seeing from our seat at IpX is still this reluctancy to invest in changing your processes and those mindsets, and also training your workforce, right? They have that budget line item for the tools, but it really doesn't matter how great the tool is, what you could do with it, if your processes just aren't up to par. And, you know, for me, that's where the balance is, right? It's getting these executives and organizations to understand you also have to put some money behind for training, you know, and you've got to get your workforce up to speed. And that allows you to change your processes, right? It's that same mantra, right? The person that broke it's the person that's trying to fix it over and over again, you know, which is craziness. And from a solution provider, Dan, one thing that's been a pet peeve of mine, Paul knows this, is solution providers have notoriously in the past, not all, but especially in the early 2000s, right? I was involved with a lot of PLM projects when they first kicked off, when we went from PDM to PLM. So I've seen PLM projects shut manufacturing down. I mean, poorly deployed projects over a weekend shut manufacturing down, and I've lived through that. I spent 4 years on an airplane recovering, and going site to site over 100 global sites and figuring out what the users really needed from a process perspective, what they needed from a training perspective to actually change those processes. And then all that drove the requirements for the tool. And from a solution perspective, when you're working with your clients, what's the Vertex method as far as, you're going in, you've got this cool tool. How are you guiding them, and how are you partnering with others? And what do you see? Do you see the clients really understanding that they're going to have to change the way they behave and change those, those legacy processes as well? Or is it just give me the tool and let's see what we can get out of it now, and hopefully we get the ROI in a few years? What's your experience?
Well, it's a great question. So the interesting thing is, when I look at this problem, right, you see companies that have invested so much in tools, technology, process, people, right? The last thing in the world you want to do as a solution provider like us is go in and tell a company, hey, you're going to have to replace everything. You're going to have to change your processes. What the important thing is to have solutions that you can really provide that enable people to iterate and incrementally improve things, right? We're focused on the user experience. We want to create the best user experiences in 3D. Think of layering on a 3D interface for your IoT solution or your digital twin initiative, right? We don't want that to be something that we come in and spend years with you talking about and costing millions of dollars just to get to square one. We come in and help companies who have 2-year projects that they're on the tail end of and perhaps on the verge of canceling because they've struggled with current tools to deliver that experience. And we help them get those things back on track in under 30 days. And with a matter of hours, you can have a 3D experience up and running. And it's us coming in and really understanding, through workshop methods, understanding what you're trying to accomplish from a business perspective. What sort of experience are you trying to deliver? From that and the results you're looking to get, we can start to carve out use cases and figure out what low-hanging fruit exists where we can really jump in and help you. And if we can't jump in and help you, we're going to tell you that too. We don't want to be working with you just to sell you something. We really want to help you improve what you're trying to do, and help you try to accomplish your end goals. We just had a company that started using us on the factory floor. They've been struggling for 2 years to deliver electronic work instructions and trying to use current tools, and that's what I just referred to. They were looking at canceling the project, and this is a board-directed initiative. They have to modernize 60 plants in North America, and in less than 30 days they developed their own proof of concept application that they're getting ready to roll out here in first quarter next year to multiple plants. So it's that sort of thing that I look at, is how can we get in and give you quick wins? And in order to help you get those quick wins, we need to understand what you're trying to accomplish, big picture from business objectives first, so that we can always have that alignment with you and your team, your leadership.
And Paul, you and I've spent a lot of time over the last 10 years discussing product lifecycle management from a methodology, not just from a system. That's one thing that I've honestly always looked up to you. You and I have always had some great conversations, really real ones, but I think you've pushed the envelope on PLM before many people even can conceptualize where we were headed. And I can tell you now, PLM from a platform, from a methodology, the evolution of where we're headed across the supply chain. And I think we've seen some of that with coronavirus. It's taught us that, the whole weakest link analogy. Where do you see us going? Where do you see the supply chain going? And it kind of ties back into the model-based world, but from a product lifecycle management, not just internally at Northrop, But when you start looking at PLM of the future with visualization, for me, I see an exciting opportunity for real-time, change communication, proper change and configuration management. You're talking hierarchy, effectivities, all of those things. There's some real-time capability, but what's your vision, for now and for the future of true PLM, not a system, but the methodology across the supply chain?
Yeah, and my perspective is, so at Orbital APK was very involved daily with PLM activities. In the last few years, my perspective has really broadened into sustainment activities and upfront acquisition cycles, mission engineering. I was doing MBSE before, but even more MBSE now at a whole nother level. And so, it's interesting that PLM term itself, right, can lead to confusion at times, right? Because how do you bound that? On one hand, PLM's always been a vision, right? It's been a vision of this end-to-end product development. And our PLM systems are our configuration data management backbone for our product definition masters that drive our manufacturing execution, that drive our ordering out of our ERP systems. And but I think my perspective has shifted a little bit, and I'm aligning, I guess, with my customers on that vision where they start to call it a digital engineering ecosystem. And when they say digital engineering, they mean manufacturing engineering, sustainment engineering. They're not just talking design activities, of course. And so for me, it's about making that global change that you talk about, Joe, an easy experience, which it's not today, right? I mean, there's too many manual handoffs across the life cycle, and we need, even Dan alluded earlier to this connection of information at a low level. And the cloud enables a scalability there that we haven't had before, that is exciting. And it's still growing, right? It's not 100% there, but it's still growing out, and there's opportunity there. But the cloud also provides not only scalability from number of relationships I can build between objects and for that global change kind of traceability, but from a collaboration standpoint with the supply chain, I can now have supply chain work with me. And even it's changing how we do, and I live in a defense world now, which is another cultural shift from Orbital APK was only about 9% classified, and Northrop is well over 50%, 60% classified programs. And so it's a different construct, right? And but that ability, previously with DoD acquisition cycles, it was about these major program milestone reviews at some kind of cadence. Now it's all about agile. How do I have a design review every day? And not just with my customers, but with those tier 1, tier 2 supply chain partners that can come into my models with me, work with me to help develop the system. And so I think it's all about breaking down barriers, breaking down interface risks, and process and tooling, I think, is a key part of that. But it's interesting, I had an interesting inflection point as I left what was Orbital APK and I looked back on my 10 years there and I thought, what's the most significant thing we accomplished? And it wasn't a given tool. And in fact, just because 3 years prior, we did a tooling trade study between Orbital Sciences and ATK, and the tooling came out to be a coin toss. The different competitors had comparable capability. They were great tools, right? Both of the ones we were considering. We started with 5 and went down to 2 and did a very intensive trade study with week-long demos and customer visits. But at the end of the day, the tooling was a coin toss. Process was important, but my reflection was the most significant thing I did over that 10 years is we found a way to get people to work together. And not just across functions like design and manufacturing, but also across organizational boundaries like divisions and business units, and getting them to collaborate on, and that empowered the organization, right? And so I feel like Tron some days, right? Just fight for the users, right? And I think that's a key part of that PLM success. I don't think it's about, I think the tooling and the process are critical to success. They've all got to come together. But if at a governance level, if you can't even work together with people across functions, across organizational boundaries, you're never gonna get there, because you will have disparate siloed process, you will have disparate siloed tooling. And so it almost starts with workforce and culture and people more than process or tooling. But process should definitely lead tooling as well, right? And we do it almost 100% backwards, right? We start with tooling, then we're like, oh yeah, crap, we better think about process. And then we're like, maybe we should talk to some end users on what they want. And it's just like almost completely backwards. And we just need to invert that, right? Start with the user, start with their requirements and needs, with that customer in mind, that owner user model, and then grow from there into process and then into tools.
Yeah, and both of those are just amazing discussion.
So can I comment on something for Paul?
Please.
You know, the thing that you mentioned there, culture, and you know, when you start thinking about the foundation of culture, you know, certainly beliefs, right, are at the top of the list, but also language. And when you start talking, going back to what we originally talked about you know, model-based definition and the, you know, 3D visualization, you know, the world I live in, that's the, you know, if you have a picture of what you're building that maps directly one-to-one with the physical that you're building, right, that to me, that context, that's almost like giving everybody a universal language around which you can start to form concepts and collaborate. We've seen that in some cases, for instance, in engineer to order companies who use our tool, for instance, to collaborate with their customers on what they're going to build. They use the results of that collaboration to make sure that what they've ordered or what they want to order is buildable, and they also use it to determine price and ultimately assembly on the factory line. You know, so it all blends together, and it brings together people around one interactive visual that helps everybody get on the same page and communicate effectively about what exactly we're trying to accomplish. And so to me, that, you know, that sort of foundation, right, which I start to see all this data coming together in digital twin, digital thread, IoT initiatives, right, it helps provide that context so the information is more meaningful and that you can build communities around it.
Yeah, no, that's a solid point. It kind of leads into, you know, we have our, you know, Paul said ecosystem, and, you know, with CM2, we have our digital ecosystem DNA. We have that model, and that models out, you know, the true collaboration, the processes, and all the systems. And it's those touch points from a cultural kind of view, Dan, that you were alluding to. And I always use analogy. It's, you know, my son, many people have heard me say this, he's got a rare genetic defect, right? So his DNA, for the time being, as of right now, you can't change it, right? There's just, you're not going to be able to improve that. He's an amazing young man. He's 11 years old now. He's battled against all the odds. But what he's figured out what to do now is, because now that he knows where his DNA is weak, he's modeling around all that, right? He's ensuring his life isn't going to go down. He's just saying, okay, so I have hearing aids. Now he's learned how to program those so he can do some things on Bluetooth that I didn't know he was doing, right? So when he's not supposed to be on his phone, he's actually on his phone through his hearing aids. But, you know, from a human perspective, we typically don't have the ability right now to really alter our DNA. We can improve the surroundings. And we've seen in the past companies do this, right? They know they have some issues, but instead of really taking the time to invest and go in and assess who they are, assess their DNA today, they kind of build around that, you know, so they're hiding that under the rug. And we'll get to that eventually. Well, guess what? Typically you have a disaster and a quality escape, you have recalls. But what we try to push, and I think what both of you are saying, is go in and assess who you are. Have an unbiased voice to do that. Tell you where your strengths and weaknesses are from a collaboration standpoint, internally and externally, right? We see a lot of companies that struggle with speed because they're not communicating clearly and concisely with their suppliers. From a process perspective, that communication, once you know where you're at today, making those improvements is actually fairly easy. but you have to really invest in going in and fixing at a company perspective. And this is the beauty of our ecosystem DNA model. You could go in and pinpoint what you need to improve, and with the tools that you have today, with the processes that are well established, you could go in and actually alter your DNA from an organizational standpoint. And what I'm interested in from both of your perspectives is that's typically not, that's not the highlight, that's not the shiny bells and whistles project that a company wants to invest in, right? That's the known dirt under the rug that we know is there. It's always been that way. You probably have resources that say they're never going to fix that. This is what they say we do. This is what we really do. How are we going to change that mindset? You know, from your perspective, it's easy to do as an individual. I always say it's, you know, it's like climbing Everest. You're not going to do that. You're not going to go to REI. You're not going to go up the mountain in a day. You have to really invest, right? You have to have the right team. You have to have the right resources. You have to do the right training. And none of that's easy. None of that's fun. That mindset perspective, and Paul, you've said it, and we've had this discussion. We'll probably have it again. Companies continue to do it backwards, right? They're going with the tool, then they're trying to change the processes, and by doing that, the reality is typically they're making their users angry. They're definitely not giving them any value, right? Not in that first deployment. So from your perspectives, you know, Dan and Paul, what can we do to make that mindset? How can we shift that mindset from a leadership perspective, right? We've got to get them to understand, yeah, we need this new cool tool. We need to have this rapid dynamic visualization capability. And we need to tie that in across the supply chain. But to do that, we're going to have to change some stuff that typically you don't invest in. How do we start changing that mindset?
Go ahead, Paul.
I'll start on that. Yeah. So, in my mind's eye, Joe, I envision a chasm between kind of the worker side and the leadership side, right? And I think leadership's all about anticipating risk and mitigating risk. And if that chasm is perceived as being too broad to bridge, then leadership will not get on board. And so it takes both sides, almost like planetary alignment, to and I think personally I'm kind of a grassroots guy, right? Even though I sit in VP calls all day, every day now, I still feel like if we don't mitigate enough of the technical risk to show that we can bridge the chasm, then leadership will not rally behind that. So I think as a user, to sit back and say, well, I'm just going to wait for leadership to drive this, you're going to be waiting a long, long time. I think it takes both sides reaching out. I could be preaching to the Democrats and Republicans almost right now. You got to reach across the aisle, right? And in a way, and work together. I think leadership's also about, especially mid-management, they're really about minimizing disruption. And that's what leads to a lot of this Band-Aid mentality of, hey, if I can just throw another Band-Aid on that dam, and they don't realize, is the dam breaking, but they also don't want the disruption of building a new dam and tearing it all down. And so it's almost like, that's why our interstates are constantly under construction, right? They don't shut the whole interstate down. Excuse me. Don't shut the whole interstate down for 2 months and just get it done. They got to keep traffic moving, right? So you got to have that. How do I have an evolutionary plan that I can keep traffic moving? I might close 2 lanes and keep them moving through 1 lane. There might be some bottlenecks there, but I can make improvements over time. And then you have to build those relationships of trust at a working level, at a leadership level. I think this concept of I view myself as a digital translator, right? I'm really taking leadership voice and connecting it with the SMEs and kind of bridging that gap. And I think it has to come from both sides in order to be successful there. But disruption is a huge factor. If you don't plan and account for the disruption, I cannot shut down all 3 lanes of traffic. I can shut down 1, and I've got to show a plan there that I can up-convert that process or that tooling in an evolutionary fashion without asking leadership to, they're not going to shut down a whole manufacturing facility for 2 months so you can do a tool change out. It will never happen, or a process change out, right? So you got to think more evolutionary journey than Big Bang.
I totally agree, Paul. I've been in the software industry for 30 years now. And one theme that's common that I see, it really touches everybody in an organization, but where it really, the impact is really felt is the tension between speed of innovation and governance, right? You want your organization to go fast. I want my organization to go fast, make a lot of money, do it at low cost, and follow the rules. Make sure that we aren't doing something that ultimately, gets us into trouble, right? And when you have that tension, leaders, what I want, what I see other leaders want, it's what I think Jeff Bezos has talked about this. It's give me two-way doors. Give me a way that I can start something that I can back out of quickly that isn't going to impact my business today. It shows me a way that I can incrementally improve things, reduce my costs, or increase the velocity of my revenue, right? And it helps me to follow the rules better, comply better with regulations, or at least gives me the ability to do both, innovate quickly and also follow whatever regulations are in place that govern my business. So it's a common tension. Back in my last company, I worked with CFOs and controllers on their SEC reporting. That's what my software started. That's how we got our start, was helping them to take a really arduous process and do it much faster with greater precision, right? And they had all sorts of rules they had to follow. And if they missed a financial report or by a certain date, or if they made a mistake in it, it would cost people jobs and cause considerable embarrassment to the company. It would affect their ability to run their business, to borrow money, or with shareholders. It was tremendously impactful. And so, the tension there, again, speed versus governance. Give me something that I can do and do quickly, move fast, innovate, but I got to stay within, the guide rails of my business. I've got to be able to continue operating as I am today, and I need to see incremental improvement. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, we're closing on the hour. I'd like to kind of tie in a few more things before we go to some Q&A. We're going to distribute this as well. We've got our live attendees today. But for me, there's some things that, from our perspective, it's important to go back, right? So we've talked about this evolutionary plan. To me, that's continual improvement. It's not continuous. Continual is you're always striving to be better. You're always monitoring, you're measuring. And I like the two-way door analogy, Dan. You also have with that continual mindset, that evolutionary mindset, as we're moving, it's okay to realize, what, that path we thought we should have been on, we need to slightly change course, right? And so that's that measure, the importance of measuring and monitoring. We call that our true north approach at IpX, but it's always keeping yourself calibrated. And what you both have also stated is ensuring it's fit for purpose for your organization. And I think a lot of companies get that incorrect. And I go back on Paul's kind of amplification, right? Are we really weighing what's the positive and what's the negative of what are we amplifying? And I think that's something we needed to keep ourselves in check. Even personally, that's a good approach. But from a business perspective, a lot of these initiatives, I think we get dazzled, and sometimes we don't look at what we're going to impact negatively. And Paul, your analogy with the interstate, we're going to shut a couple lanes down, and we need people to know that, right? We need to make sure that's where a lot of highway I don't know if you've driven in Indiana. Typically, you find out the lanes are closed when you get there, right? And there's a traffic jam for 3 hours. Had they given you some proactive notice, even with a couple of signs, you could have chosen a different route. But instead, you show up and you realize, oh, they've shut down 2 lanes. Now I'm going to be stuck. And I think that happens at companies today. I want to really go back on that communication, and both of you have mentioned that from a cultural perspective. To me, it's getting organizations to communicate in a proactive manner, right? That's for me, that's business 101. It should be your priority. How are we being proactive in our communication? How are we being clear and concise in our communication? Because if we can't do that, all these other initiatives, they're going to amplify the negative, as Paul would allude to. So I'd like to close out, with a couple points from your perspective on really, if you had 3 things you want the audience to hear and remember, what are they? And maybe we haven't talked about them, but from your perspectives, you each got the helm now. What do you want the audience to really grab hold of?
Paul, you want to take that one first? I'm happy to go too, either way.
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. Two follow-up quick thoughts, Joe, that communication, from a communication standpoint, I've seen groups do unbelievable, amazing organizational change management. It's never enough, right? You can't over-communicate. And by the way, in Indiana, I'm pretty sure if you go look, you can sign up for a text message that will tell you when lanes are shut down. But in Utah, they also put up these bright signs that say, hey, this Friday, lanes are shutting down, so that people know in advance. But you just can't over-communicate, right, from that standpoint. On the measurement standpoint, sometimes people don't know what to measure, right? And I think from that standpoint, it's okay to ask people for help, right? I think we get so ingrained in school that you can't cheat that we forget now you're allowed to cheat, right? We can totally steal answers from other people. So talk to your peers, do a one-on-one benchmark, sign an NDA, and go or bring in, I think particularly you talked, Joe, about some of the True North consulting type things. When you hit a friction point that you can't agree on, it's a great opportunity to bring in an unbiased viewpoint as a tiebreaker, so to speak. A year ago, my son and I were the same height, and we could not, I'm like, no, I'm taller than you. He's like, no, I'm taller than you. And we had to get my wife to, now we don't measure anymore because he's 6'4" and I'm 6'2", and so we gave up on that. But anyway, but I think when you need a tiebreaker, I think having a neutral consultant come in has been very valuable for us to help influence that tiebreak, right, and help direct. But also if you're starting off early is another one. But so my key takeaways, I guess, are, it can be daunting, right? I am overwhelmed just about every day trying to steer the ship of a 91,000 person organization as we move to the cloud, and we're making significant changes in the company. And you're going to have to take some risk, right? You're going to have to make some bets. And I think if you look at the mega trends, there's safety in those, right? There's a reason that Microsoft is shifting to Linux and cloud operations, and you're following that mega trend, right? That there's safety in that the world is moving that way. And so you might as well be proactive about it and take confidence in that, right? And you can move out, you can make decisions, you can be entrepreneurial in what doesn't feel like an entrepreneurial system. And even though at the time you feel like, gosh, they're going to fire me for this, if they fire you for doing the right things for your company, you don't want to work there anyway, right? So just take ownership of the company and be entrepreneurial and drive it. And not only do you make a difference for the users and getting product out the door faster, but you're rewarded for it too, right? And so don't be afraid to take chances, I guess, would be, because it's going to be disruptive. And not doing anything is also a decision, and it will also be disruptive. So you should at least be proactive in your choices and be disruptive. It's okay, right? Change is inevitable, so embrace it and drive it.
Thanks, Paul. That's fantastic. Dan?
Yeah, great points, Paul. I think, to me, effective communication is all about alignment. And, I have a very different experience from Paul in some respects. In other respects, we're kind of working on the same things. I've never worked for an organization with 91,000 employees, but I've built them from 9 to 1,500, 2,000, 2,000 employees. And you change strategies as you grow about how you communicate. And it's all about alignment. It's all about making sure everybody in the organization is pulling on the same road. And to do that, it goes back to something you mentioned right at the beginning of the conversation, Paul, about, I think it was a receptionist that had a VR experience and didn't understand what products you built until she saw that. That's a fantastic story, right? What tools you have available to align everyone in your organization about what you're building, how you're building it, how you're serving your customers. I think the organizations of the future, what I see evolving for companies, I'm seeing it start to happen in manufacturing. I've seen it with companies I've worked with before. It's more about, people talk about enabling your customers or customer-centric focus, customer first. But what I'm seeing emerge is more of it's a people-first approach, which thinks of the people that are closest to your customers, those service technicians, those salespeople in the field, people on the factory floor that are building your products, making sure they have what they need to be successful. And my belief is, and one of the things that got me back into this industry was a belief that the ability to align people in your organization with rich 3D visuals, right, is there if we just make it easier to leverage those assets that organizations are already spending a fortune on, right? Get them downstream of the authoring, get them out to people to help provide experiences to that receptionist so that she can understand exactly what we're doing in our company, why we're doing it, right? And if you do that and leverage those the right way, you can layer on all sorts of information that make it relatable for a person in their role and make it better. Now, you could align people with a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet. If I walk in the door and look at a process that you're running and it's better off and easier to run with Excel, I'm going to tell you, I'll be the first person to tell you that. But what I see right now in the industry is an opportunity with cloud computing to create an ecosystem that helps align organizations and deliver better, more usable applications, purpose-built applications to the people that serve your customers, which means your customers are going to be better served.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it instills a sense of pride in where you work, right? If you have an organization that's really trying to empower that workforce for those users, you get a sense of pride, and I've always known Paul and to have a great sense of pride in where he works, and he takes it very serious. And Dan, I think
look at my office. No, I mean,
and Dan, I think you're the same. You're pushing for excellence, and so that's not easy. And it's the same thing for IpX. And I want to close first. Paul, Dan, thank you for taking the time again. This has just been a wonderful roundtable for me. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully, we can do it again. The one thing I want to close on is, you got to remember, right now times are tough for businesses, and when it comes to working with your partners and your peers and, some of the smaller businesses, and IpX is a certified small business as well, don't forget about your partner network. I have had the ability to meet some of the most amazing people. I have traveled the world a few times. And I consider all of them friends and peers. There's no better enjoyment in my career than working with people that I consider friends and actually give them value and walking away and knowing that we've helped improve their ecosystem. So don't forget about working with your partners in your supply chain and push that boundary. I think sometimes, we can get lost, and things can get daunting, as Paul was saying, but we've got to support ourselves right now and support our partners and the supply chain, because that's the only way we're going to call out of this. If for your small businesses, for your mid-sized companies that you're working with, don't forget about them, because times are tough. And what better way to work with some people that you just enjoy. So for me, that's the one thing I want to challenge everyone. We've got to climb out of this. And when you talk about getting legacy and the leading from industry, we got to start working together again. And we got to figure out how to get creative in doing that. So Dee, I know we're pushing time. Do we have a couple questions you'd like to throw at Dan and Paul, or would you just like to close out today?
Well, I think we could go ahead, Paul. What were you going to say?
or Dee, if there's questions from the audience, happy to go a little over too if we need to. So
yeah, same.
Let's take one for the sake of time, and then we will get to the rest of them individually afterwards. We'll make sure that we reach out to anybody who had one. Dana just mentioned a moment ago about the cloud, and so one of the questions is, how do you see the cloud transforming business in this new era where everybody's working from home? So maybe that's a good one to close on.
Oh yeah, well, it's instrumental. We have a company we're working with right now that basically said, okay, we want to deliver VR experience to 1,000 of our engineers, and they're all working from home. And we don't want to spend the money on the hardware to deliver that experience. Can you help us, right? So the cloud, if you think about it, right, you can think of, I'm renting a server from Amazon or Microsoft, and I'm going to just put stuff on there, and I'm going to serve up an experience. Maybe I'm going to, put my PLM system up there, right, as it is, lift and shift, right? The cloud is something where if you build applications, you can make them elastic, and you can have them, in effect, scale with the need, the size of data to work with. And to me, the cloud is, it's all about trying to optimize the software to leverage the computing power available to you to avoid having to send all that data to the end user, right? And if we do that, then it doesn't matter where you work from. You can work from home, you can be on a beach, you can be on site, servicing equipment, and it can bring everybody together in that way because it's available pretty much everywhere, right? And that experience of, and having experiences that work across devices that don't depend on the hardware you carry around in your hand or have on your desk, that is really critical. And the cloud makes all that possible. So it enables us to be untethered from, heavy hardware, expensive hardware, and untethered from the office, and provides for more mobile experience. Our software, one of the things that was kind of cool, I was on a plane looking at a massive size model, at 35,000 feet, right? On, I can't remember the network carrier there, but, basically looking at a large model on a plane. Yeah, exactly. GoGo. On GoGo, right? And I'm actually working with this model, and the model is hosted in the cloud, but it's just delivering images at 15, 20 frames a second to me. So I'm able to work with people and give my team feedback on new product features. I mean, that's amazing. And that's all enabled by thinking cloud first, cloud native.
Yeah, and it almost seems like a mirage, right? Because it's better reliability, better scalability, better performance at lower cost. It just doesn't add up almost, right? But it's impressive, right? The cloud is unlocking all sorts of potential. And this is coming from a DoD contractor. You would have thought we'd be the last ones talking about cloud from a security standpoint, but we are moving to the cloud. The DoD is moving to the cloud, and there are secure cloud options. It is inevitable. And even 3 years ago, the cloud was a 4-letter word. It was a swear word in our circles, and now it is fully embraced. It is moving forward. So it's exciting, right? There's all kinds of potential there to scale and perform and to move faster.
The last company I built, one of our major customers, JP Morgan, we were their first cloud application, very first. And they looked at us and they said, we're concerned about security, but if we're going to take a step into cloud, we understand what you've done about security. You take it seriously, and this is a good first step for us to do it. And the result was, they had a case where they had a challenge. There was a nor'easter that hit, and suddenly they can't get into the office. But they were able to continue and actually get their 10Q filed on time because everybody was able to work from home. Right? Some people, when they could predict that hurricane was coming, they sent everybody to Ohio from Jersey City and said, you can work from there because all of our financial reporting is cloud-based, right? That's what it enables. It enables, as you said, the reliability, durability, and the security. In some cases, you can argue that cloud and holding all that data in a secure cloud location is stronger, better than things that are emailed or FTP'd around. Right. So good question. Really good question. Thank you.
Well, I think the joke on top of all of this is that Joe's computer had a forced restart in the middle of that while we're all working from home.
I thought he wasn't reacting to some of the things we were saying, Paul?
Yeah, you kind of froze up there. But that must be a sign, Deanna, that we've reached our time, so that's okay.
We wrapped it up. It has been a pleasure to have you both. We really, really appreciate it. This is being recorded, so we'll make sure to send it out to anybody who didn't get a chance to join us today. And if we have more questions, we'll make sure to answer them. Thank you both so much, and we look forward to doing this again.
Hey, thanks, Deanna. Thanks, Joe. Thanks.
Paul, pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Oh, Joe's back. Joe,
I'm
thank
back.
you. We're
Just
closing.
a great way to close out the call with a forced blue screen of death. So I think it's, again, thank you. I know we're jumping off, but I think, that just proves the point that these things are going to happen, and how you react and how you react with the people you work with, there's no reason to panic, just communicate. But again, Dan, Paul, it's been a privilege. Hopefully we can do it again.
Thank you, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Deanna.